My name is Talia, 28 years old, and the night my sister Briar tried to turn my life into her party decor was the night I stopped being useful and started being seen. There's a certain irony to it, how people like my family measure worth in how well you serve them. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who never said no. If Briar needed money, I was the fallback. If my mother needed a decorator for one of her luncheons, I was the one arranging peonies and candles until my hands smelled like wax and regret. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that I had the right to say no, too. I came home to Savannah, where my mother, Lenore, announced that Briar's 32nd birthday would be legendary. Price tag, £120,000. My role, pay and smile. Her words landed like a command, not a request. The air in our dining room felt heavy with old perfume and entitlement. My mother's voice always had that tone, a mixture of silk and steel that left no room for disagreement. Briar sat across from me, sipping champagne like she'd already earned the celebration. She didn't ask if I could afford it. She didn't care. In her mind, I was still the little sister with a soft heart and open wallet. When I refused, the silence was sharp enough to cut. My mother blinked, as if she hadn't heard me right. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice brittle. I repeated it, steady, calm, almost clinical. "I said no, Mother. I'm not paying for Briar's birthday." Briar laughed, that polished, rehearsed sound she used for social media videos and charity galas. "Oh, come on, Talia," she said. "You know you'll do it. You always do." But I didn't. Not this time. Something inside me had shifted, something small but irreversible. When I left that evening, the porch light flickered over the familiar path to my car, casting long shadows across the gravel. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from fear but from something fiercer, freedom, maybe, or the first taste of it. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Briar had posted a picture of my car, a faded blue hatchback I'd had since university, with a caption, "When your sister's car is older than your skincare routine," faced with tears of joy. The comments were exactly what she wanted. Laughing emojis, pity disguised as humor, strangers agreeing that I was too frugal for someone who owned a design firm. Then came the next blow. She booked my venue, the Palmetto House, behind my back. The Palmetto House wasn't just a business to me. It was my first real victory. I'd spent years turning that crumbling estate into a space that felt alive again. Every archway, every polished railing, every petal arrangement bore the memory of long nights, sweat, and a kind of lonely pride. It was mine, my independence, my proof that I could build something from nothing. So when I received the glossy contract in my inbox, I froze. Briar's name shimmered at the top, followed by mine, listed as the guarantor. A neat little clause at the bottom read, "In the event of non-payment by the client, responsibility shall defer to the undersigned guarantor." If she forgot to pay, I would be legally bound to cover the entire £120,000. I stared at the signature line for a long time. She hadn't even asked. She'd simply assumed I would sign, just as she assumed the world existed to fund her performances. My chest ached with a mix of anger and exhaustion. I wasn't surprised. Briar had always lived as though consequences were other people's problems. But this was different. This wasn't another social slight or spoiled outburst. This was my work, my reputation, my livelihood. That night, I sat on my cottage porch with a cup of cold tea, watching the streetlights blink in the humid Savannah dark. The jasmine vines swayed gently along the fence, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. I replayed every moment in my head, the laughter, the sneer, the contract, and I realized something I should have known years ago. People like Briar don't take your kindness, they consume it. And they will keep consuming it until you draw a line and make them choke on it. So, I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't post a rebuttal online or beg anyone to understand my side. Instead, I documented. I saved every message, every email, every invoice. I took screenshots of her posts and gathered records from my staff. I wasn't preparing for war. I was preparing for clarity. The kind that doesn't need to scream. By the time the moon rose high over the moss-draped trees, my decision was made. I wouldn't let her turn my work into her stage. I wouldn't let her use my name as a shield for her recklessness. That was the night everything shifted, not because of some grand confrontation, but because I finally saw the quiet strength in refusal. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let the scent of jasmine fill the air. Somewhere in the distance, the cicadas hummed a soft, endless rhythm. For years, I had built spaces for other people's celebrations. But that night, sitting under the wide savanna sky, I realized I was finally ready to build something for myself. The Palmetto house was made for elegance. High ceilings, sunlight that slid across polished floors, chandeliers that caught morning light like crystal rain. I had restored every inch of it myself. The worn staircase, the faded murals, even the scent of the rooms, replaced with subtle jasmine and linen. It was supposed to be a place of beauty and calm. So when Briar stormed in that afternoon, fury wrapped in couture, it felt like a violation. She came with the energy of a spoiled tempest, her heels stabbing the marble with each step. "Who designed this?" she barked, waving at the floral arrangements as if they were offensive. The staff froze. Juno, my manager and closest ally, gave me a small, knowing look from across the hall. We'd been expecting this. Briar thrived on spectacle. To her, chaos was power and humiliation was theater. She wasn't just angry that I'd refused to bankroll her party, she was angry that I existed outside her script. I stayed in the office, behind the tinted glass window overlooking the ballroom, the screens before me glowing softly. Every camera fed me her tantrum from a different angle, the torn flowers, the trembling event assistant trying to explain logistics, the decorator flinching as Briar raised her voice. "Do you even know who I am?" Briar snapped, tossing a vase aside. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the room. "I could sue you all for this mess." I didn't move. Juno's message flashed on my screen again. "It's all recording. Stay where you are." That was Juno's strength, calm precision in the face of storms. She knew my sister's patterns, knew that confronting her directly would only feed the performance. We didn't need an audience. We needed truth on record. My hands rested on the desk, steady. There was no anger this time, no shaking voice or a racing heart. Just a cold, deliberate stillness. For years, I had been the one smoothing things over when Briar exploded, apologizing to her friends, cleaning up her messes, explaining her behavior to guests who whispered behind napkins. But now I had something she didn't: control. Quiet, documented, undeniable control. Every insult sat neatly on our cameras. Every curse, every threat, every cruel word tore my staff. Archived, time-stamped, stored in 3 separate backups. It wasn't about revenge. It was about record. About reclaiming my own truth after years of being talked over, dismissed, and rewritten. From my window, I could see the flowers she had ripped. The pale lilies meant to drape over the center table now lay crushed on the floor, their fragrance still sweet despite the ruin. I found that poetic somehow. Beauty surviving violence. When she finally left the ballroom, her fury trailing behind her like smoke, the room exhaled. My staff began picking up petals, righting chairs, sweeping shards of glass. No one spoke. They didn't have to. They all knew what I was doing, what this quiet defiance meant. I walked down the stairs after she was gone, my heels clicking softly against the marble. The scent of jasmine mixed with dust and tension. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, and Juno nodded, her jaw tight but proud. "She said she'd destroy the place if we didn't redo everything to her liking," Juno murmured. "I told her we follow written contracts, not temper tantrums." I almost smiled. "And she said she'd have your head." That made me laugh, not out of mockery but out of something freer. I wasn't afraid anymore. There was power in having proof, in knowing the story couldn't be twisted this time. Later, I sat in my office reviewing the footage. The security monitors flickered with angles of her shouting, the crushed bouquet, the decorators shrinking back. The audio was sharp and clear. Every accusation captured, every insult preserved. I made a copy for the legal folder and another for my personal archive. I wasn't sure why I felt the need to keep it, perhaps not for confrontation, but as a reminder of a turning point. The day I stopped reacting and started recording. There's a particular kind of strength that comes from silence. I used to think silence meant surrender, that being the quiet one made me invisible. But as I sat there, watching Briar's fury play out on screen, I realized silence, when chosen, is power. I didn't need to match her volume. I didn't need to prove anything. The truth was already speaking for me, crystal clear and irrefutable. That night, as the staff left and the last lights dimmed, I walked alone through the empty ballroom. The air still carried the faint echo of her anger, but the space was mine again, steady, whole, and waiting for calm to return. The chandeliers shimmered softly above, scattering light across the marble floor like stars. I paused beneath them, my reflection faint in the polished surface. There had been a time when I would have cried after a day like this, wondering why my own sister seemed to despise me so deeply. But not anymore. The ache was still there, but it no longer defined me. As I locked the doors, Juno caught up to me in the parking lot, her clipboard tucked under one arm. "You did good," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "I just didn't stop her from showing who she really is." And that was the truth of it. The setup wasn't about creating drama. It was about letting reality unfold on its own. For once, I didn't need to justify or explain. The footage, the records, the calm, all of it spoke louder than any argument could. There was no need to raise my voice. I had learned that silence, paired with evidence, speaks louder than outrage. The morning they arrived, Savannah was steeped in that golden kind of light that makes everything look too beautiful for conflict. The Palmetto house glowed softly, the pale walls kissed by sunlight filtering through the magnolias. My staff was quiet but steady, everyone aware that something was about to unfold. Juno had arrived early, a cup of coffee in one hand and a folder tucked under her arm, our evidence neatly printed and time-stamped. We'd reviewed everything twice. We didn't need theatrics, just truth. By noon, the hum of expensive engines filled the driveway. I watched from the office window as a black town car pulled up, followed by a smaller silver coupe. The doors opened, and out stepped Briar, flawless as always, her hair styled to perfection, her sunglasses large enough to shield the storm brewing beneath them. Archer followed, sharp in his tailored suit, his parents walking behind, poised and polite in that old money way that seemed to glide rather than step. From my vantage point, I could already hear Briar's laughter echoing through the hall. "This is going to be spectacular," she said to Archer's mother, gesturing grandly to the ballroom entrance. "You'll see why everyone in Savannah wants me to host here. Connections are everything, darling." Her voice carried the same arrogance that had always filled our home growing up, the sound of entitlement dressed as charm. But beneath it now, I could hear something else, a tremor. She didn't know it yet, but she was walking into a room where her performance no longer worked. The music that played over the sound system, a light instrumental playlist, faded suddenly. Heads turned toward the staircase. I stepped out from the upper landing, my heels soft against the marble. My reflection flickered across the polished railing as I descended, calm and steady. The air seemed to still with every step. I walked down the marble stairs and introduced myself as owner and creative director. The words came easily, my tone measured, professional. Not vindictive. Not smug. Just true. Briar froze. For a split second, her expression faltered, the confident smile slipping before she caught it again. "Oh," she said, too brightly, "Talia, I didn't realize you were here." But she knew. She always knew. Archer turned toward me, polite confusion in his eyes. "You own this place?" he asked, his tone more surprised than skeptical. "Yes," I replied simply. "I built it from the ground up. Every event here runs through me and my team." Silence spread like wildfire through the room. Even the faint rustle of the curtains seemed to pause. The Whitfields looked between us, their faces a blend of discomfort and dawning understanding. Silence changed sides. Juno stepped forward then, calm and efficient as ever. She carried a small tablet and tapped the screen. Within moments, the large projector screen flickered to life, displaying time-stamped footage from 2 days ago. Juno played the footage. There was no narration, no accusation, just the sound of Briar's voice, sharp and venomous, echoing through the ballroom speakers. The images showed her tearing flowers, berating staff, tossing threats like confetti. The Whitfields' expressions stiffened, their genteel smiles collapsing into quiet horror. Briar's hand flew to her chest. "This is completely out of context," she began, but her voice wavered. I didn't respond. Juno spoke for us both, her tone firm. "We cited breach of conduct and voided the booking." The words hung in the air like the toll of a bell. Briar blinked rapidly, her perfect composure unraveling thread by thread. Archer's mother turned to me, her voice calm but edged with disappointment. "Miss Talia, thank you for handling this so professionally. I'm deeply sorry for what your team endured." Archer's parents thanked me for protecting my team. That moment, the quiet acknowledgement, the validation from strangers who could see the truth without explanation, felt heavier than applause. Archer stood there, silent. His gaze shifted from the screen to Briar, then back to me. I could almost see the realization sinking into him, layer by layer. The image he'd built of her, graceful, powerful, untouchable, was cracking before his eyes. Archer looked at Briar and saw the truth. There was no grand explosion, no shouting match, no pleas, just the soft collapse of lies meeting daylight. Briar opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her voice, usually so sure, seemed to vanish in the quiet. For the first time, she didn't have a script to perform. "Ms. Whitfield," I said gently, "I'm afraid we won't be hosting this event. Our policies protect our staff from verbal or physical abuse, and the footage clearly demonstrates both." Her mother nodded solemnly. "You're right," she said softly. "You did the right thing." I inclined my head. "Thank you." Briar stood there, trembling just slightly, her hands clenched around the strap of her handbag. For once, she didn't look like the star of her story. She looked small. When they turned to leave, Archer hesitated. He met my eyes for a fleeting moment, a silent apology, or maybe just gratitude for the clarity he'd been forced to see. No scenes, no screaming, just consequences. As the heavy doors closed behind them, the ballroom felt lighter. The staff began to breathe again. Juno exhaled softly, her eyes meeting mine with quiet satisfaction. We didn't cheer. We didn't gloat. We simply stood in the silence that remained, clean, honest, unshakable. And as I looked around the space, sunlight spilling across the marble floor, I realized that justice didn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it came dressed in composure, carrying proof and peace in equal measure. The reckoning had come, and for once, it didn't need to be loud. The sky was soft that evening, painted in strokes of coral and gold as the sun dipped behind the moss-draped oaks. The air in Savannah always carried a kind of languid grace at twilight, the world slowing just enough for you to feel the weight of your own heartbeat. I sat on my porch, barefoot, a cup of chamomile cooling beside me, and breathed in the scent of jasmine that trailed from the fence line. It was the first real quiet I'd had in weeks. No ringing phones, no tense meetings, no crises to clean up. Just the hum of cicadas, the creak of the porch swing, and the rhythmic whisper of the wind through the vines. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I watched as the lights across the street flickered on one by one, tiny golden orbs glowing through the dusk. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor laughed, a low, familiar sound that faded into the night air. Everything about the moment felt so simple, so profoundly calm, that it almost startled me. After years of feeling like the background to someone else's story, I was finally the main character in my own quiet chapter. My phone buzzed once on the table beside me. I didn't rush to pick it up, I already knew who it was. My father's name lit the screen, an apology, late and clumsy, written in short, stilted words. The same man who had spent a lifetime defending Briar's behavior, calling her spirited, while calling me sensitive. I stared at the message for a long moment, the glow of the screen soft against the deepening blue of evening. Then, with a steady breath, I deleted it. No anger, no satisfaction, just a quiet release. And I smiled, not the forced, practiced smile I'd worn at family dinners, but something real. Something that belonged only to me. It was strange how peace didn't feel triumphant. It didn't roar or announce itself. It just settled in quietly, the way dusk replaces day. Natural, inevitable, gentle. Inside the house, the soft ticking of the wall clock marked the passing minutes. Each tick felt like a small reminder that time moves forward, regardless of who chooses to stay behind. I thought about Briar then, not with bitterness but with distance. I imagined her trying to rewrite the story, searching for someone else to blame. But the truth no longer needed my defense. It was already standing on its own, clear as daylight. The Palmetto house was safe, my staff respected, my reputation intact. The chaos had passed, leaving only calm in its wake. I leaned back against the porch railing, the wood warm beneath my palms, and looked out at the silver thread of the river in the distance. It shimmered faintly under the rising moon. The real revenge was simple. I kept the business, my boundaries, and my peace. I whispered the words to myself, not as a declaration, but as a reminder, a vow to never again trade calm for acceptance, or peace for permission. The party lost its venue. I kept my life. And that, I realized, was the most elegant ending I could have ever written. No destruction, no spectacle, just quiet justice, wrapped in the fragrance of jasmine and the softness of night. I closed my eyes, listening to the slow rhythm of the evening, and let the peace stay where it belonged, inside me.